it going, folks? I'm Matt. This is Meet the Industry. Today we have a very, very cool guest on. Cool for a couple of reasons. One, because he's just a super nice guy, and the other, his line of work. He works with cold, he works with cannabis, he does extractions. Bone Cloud, brother, we know each other from the Discord. Welcome to the show, man. Stoked to have you here.
Thanks, man. It's a pleasure. I'm glad to be here and looking forward to getting into it with you. I've been an admirer of yours for a while now, so happy to be here.
Oh, and and just seeing some of the stuff that you're posting on the Discord, you pop on there, and I did 250 pounds of extraction today, and it's just like, oh my god, the amount of stuff that you work with, and like bring your knowledge to us, teach us, tell us. I'm really excited to have you here so we can learn from you. That being said, just a couple of quick ones off the start, guys. If you're interested in joining the Discord, shoot me an email, photosyntech1@gmail.com. I don't like opening it right up and putting links everywhere. I'd rather have people reach out to me. And we'd love to have you on there. Lots of growers talking about cool stuff and none of the drama that you might find somewhere else. And if you do like what I'm doing, Patreon, below. Throw a few bucks my way and might get you into a contest for some exceptionally cool stuff. And you can always head over to my website for contest info and maybe win something neat. That being said, Bone Cloud, let's talk extraction processes, man.
Yeah, man.
Before we really dig in on that, though, I want to know sort of who you are, where you come from, and your introduction to cannabis, and more so, how you got to where you are now.
Yeah, of course. First thing, I just want to express how much my teenage self would be so blown away by the fact that I just had my 34th birthday about a week and a bit ago, and I thought, oh, half of my age, 17, I think I started smoking weed somewhere around 16, 15, right? And how mind blown my younger self would be to know that here I am working in cannabis, and not even that, but also being interviewed about how I got to there,
Yeah.
So between 17-year-old me and now, there's a whole pathway to get to where I am now. So it probably sounds familiar to a lot of people. You start smoking weed back in your teenage years, and I remember back then weed to me didn't really have much more to it than some we called hydro, some we called creeper,
Oh yeah, good old creeper.
There was hash, and then there was oil, and oil was a black kind of sticky oil.
Unless you got the good stuff, the cherry oil.
Yeah, and the thing is, I always heard about cherry or honey oil, some people call it.
Yes, the first rinse stuff.
Yeah, I never saw it. I just heard about it. Yeah, it was just a unicorn that I never found.
Yeah. Just to interrupt for a second. So Bone Cloud and I are pretty close geographically. He's just out west from me. So a lot of the terminology, I mean, you'll hear guys talk about brickweed out west. Out east. Us guys out west, well, we had all the good stuff from BC. So we talk about it a little different. But anyway, sort of interrupt. Anyway, you were saying.
Yeah, so just real quickly, I've been in BC for just a year. I came out here for the job that I have currently, which is a processing technician at an alcohol extraction facility. But I spent the last, say, 15 years or so over in the Greater Toronto area. So that's where a lot of my evolution of weed sort of occurred.
Interesting. So it's funny because the reason why I said that was you're using all the same terminology that we use out here out west, but when talking to people more out east, they're not using the same stuff. So it's funny that we kind of traveled in that same circle, at least term wise.
Yeah, I mean, do you use the term half quarters?
No, and I know that's an out east one for sure. Yeah, we're eights out here, so
yeah, because I'll be here and say half quarter, and they'll look at me like, "What are you saying, man?" So there's a little bit, but okay. Let's skip more ahead. Past teenage years. Okay, university, smoking even more weed than my teenage years, and I come across a guy who offers me something I've never seen before, which is edible lollipops, just like candy on a stick lollipops.
Yep.
And up until that point, the only edibles I'd ever seen were things that people were making with, like, your Miss Christie's, throw in your own like eggs or milk and just whip up a quick batch of brownies or a cake or cookies. Nothing too mind blowing, really, and always tasted like weed a little bit in the background. But these lollipops, though, were like I'd never seen anything like it, and they didn't taste like weed. They tasted fantastic, and they did the job. Like, they actually worked. So like it was the whole package, and I was like, this is something new here. And we're talking like 2013, 2012, maybe somewhere around that time period, maybe even earlier. I'm a little fuzzy on the years, but long story short, the person making them was like someone I'm like, I have to meet this guy, because let's be real, like, the weed, the black market for weed, you met all kinds of people in it, and it, in fairness, like, weed kind of sold itself. You didn't have to be
no advertising campaign needed.
Yeah, you didn't need to be a genius to sell it. People have always wanted weed, and so as long as there's people, there's going to be people selling it. Except this guy was like one in a million, I would say. Like, in addition to like his, when I first met him, I said, your lollipops, there's something else, like, wow. And he's like, wait till you see what else I've got in the pipeline. And what that turned out to be was like gummy candies, sour gummy candies, which were even more of a hit, because, individual little pieces that you could take one at a time versus a lollipop that you kind of have to eat the whole thing. And if you put it down, it becomes like a sticky mess. So just little things like that, they do make a difference from a consumer experience.
Oh, of course. Yes, absolutely.
So I decided to partner up with him, because he was a guy with a lot of ideas, and I just felt like I could kind of help him bring those to market, so to speak.
So at this point, then, had you had much in the way of experience with extractions, or this was sort of at the beginning?
I had literally one experience with extraction before this point, and it was, are you familiar with the term open blasting?
No. Well, okay, so maybe explain.
All right, so open blasting refers to like an uncontained system where you're using a solvent, in this case like butane, and you're letting it evaporate into like the air around you. You're not collecting it later on, and it's very rudimentary. In this case, it's like something as simple as like a long piece of PVC pipe. You might have a coffee filter at the bottom and a small port at the top to crack a canister of like butane that you would use to fill a lighter up with. And then it just runs down into a Pyrex dish, and you like let it evaporate at room temperature, or you sit it in a thing of water to try and help it. But it's like very, very, like, we might say ghetto. Like, it's very
dangerous too, though. It's correct me if I'm wrong. It's there's is it flashpoint? Trying to remember my high school chemistry here.
Well, it has like an explosive limit. Like, it's very volatile.
Right.
I mean, that's why we use it as fluid for lighters. So yes, it is dangerous. Did I know this, or was I aware of it at the time? Like, not really. Yeah. Now, yeah, definitely. And I don't recommend anyone do it. But if I'm going to be true to like history, that's like the very first.
Well, that's the problem with the black market and whatnot. I mean, you got guys in the garage blasting butane through a PVC pipe, and I may or may not have seen this in the past, or doing isopropyl alcohol on the stovetop, stuff like that. It just,
or a rice cooker.
Yeah, really dangerous stuff. I mean, rice cooker, one step less, but still, any type of alcohol vapor is, well, it's got to bear its dangers, of course. But not to detract. So you, of course, now met this individual, and you guys wanted to start setting up shop. What happened from there?
So really, the extraction portion comes into it when you realize that, okay, to get an edible, you need to take what's in weed and get it into the food somehow. There needs to be like some way to make that happen.
Yeah, A plus B equals profit. So
yeah. And like, we go back to that brownie example. Well, for most people, it used to just be like, grind up your weeds, simmer it in butter, add the butter. but you can be a little bit more sophisticated than that. And for us at the time, it was making what some people will call like Rick Simpson oil, RSO, Phoenix Tears, or crude. And it's actually like the same black oil that I mentioned earlier, and then using that as the ingredient in a recipe to make candy. So that was how extraction kind of started for me, more seriously. But then after that, we actually tried to actually, because it blew up. Like we went from a stovetop
Metaphorically, of
to
course.
yeah, but we went from like a stovetop in someone's townhouse to literally having to rent a whole apartment just as a candy operation, and then bigger and then bigger. And like at this point we were we had molds that we were cutting cubes of candy out of. We were getting printed packages that we had to like slice and heat seal and then fill and then heat seal. It was I have learned something about like manufacturing that I never thought I would ever be aware of.
Industrial packaging expert.
Yeah, but from like my own two hands, no like machinery or robots at that point. But the person we had that was so actually what we did was, as this was blowing up, we were looking at Colorado, because this was like 2015, and I believe Colorado was legal or had legalized.
It was
recently.
right around that time. Yeah, somebody will post it in the comments, I'm sure. But
Yeah. And we were like, well, we've got a thing here, but we can't do it up in Canada. It's not, it's got a limit to how far it can go, or so it seemed.
Yeah.
So we started looking at Colorado. We said, hey, like, why don't we, try and do what we're doing here, just bring it down there. So my partner went down there and spent a summer just kind of exploring, trying to see what we could pull off. But neither of us being citizens of the US or green card holders, it just wasn't possible to start a business. You need insurance, and we didn't have that kind of thing. Yeah. So it didn't pan out. But what did happen was, like, I used the example of Colorado or California as kind of like how we view Japan for like technology regarding like cell phones and laptops and stuff. It's like looking into the future. If you see what people in Japan are using as their standard phone. So it's like that for weed in those places, and at the time, basically what the future was closed loop butane systems. Like they were making BHO, shatter, this kind of stuff. And it caught his eye. So he basically shipped a unit back to us in Ontario, and we started making basically shatter at the time. And at first it was just meant to be a cleaner and more efficient method of making extracts to go into our edibles. But then as the market grew, it began to be a market entirely on its own. In fact, at one point we had an argument of like, should we just shut the candy making down altogether and just go into full scale extracts?
Right. Just focus on the raw product itself.
Because I think what happened was somebody just came up with the dab rig, and all of a sudden, like, people knew how to use it. Because, like, I don't know if you remember this, but do you remember butter? Like BUDDER?
Yeah, absolutely.
Right?
Absolutely.
And I remember, because I dug it up recently, it's in a Cannabis Culture article from like 2009 or 2004 or something like that. There was a guy out in BC, the Butter King, and he had like come up with this product, and it was like an extract made using butane, but it didn't really catch on. Like, it was too niche. Nobody really knew how to smoke it, I think, was a big deal. Yeah. And then somebody must have come up with the, like, propane, the butane torch and the dab rig.
Okay. I'm just going to pause there for a minute. You give a stoner some weed and nothing is smoking in it, and you are going to find the miracle of mechanical engineering, man. I mean, let's face it. This is how it happened. Somebody was looking at something, went, okay, look, I got this torch in this little glass bowl. We're going to try something here. So, yeah, stoner lore, right? But
and like that kind of extraction actually like dates back to the 70s. Like, chemists were using these kind of solvents, but it just didn't kind of pick up in the recreational market until the early 2010s up in, or maybe a little bit later. But kind of lost my. Oh yeah, okay. So anyway, my friend, he's an engineer by education, and he's the kind of person that like he's never satisfied with something the way it is. He must constantly improve it. You know,
Yeah, I know
he
the
has a
type.
system. Yeah, so he's like, yeah, it's good, but I can make it better.
Yeah.
And long story short, he eventually graduated from doing extraction to building extraction equipment, and today he has like a fully legal equipment manufacturing company. He designs like equipment, and that was kind of for us the leap out of the black market into the legal one. So we left like the actual making of extracts behind and got into like the making of machinery for extraction. And then for me at that point, I faced like a split in the road, because I was never as like mechanically gifted. I wasn't necessarily the guy who could go and like take apart a system and rebuild it. So I was inspired by him. I said, wow, you know, what he's done is amazing. And there's definitely a way for me to move forward, but I need to up my knowledge. I need to understand this even better than I do now.
Yeah.
So I started hunting for teachers. Somebody that was offering something where they said, yeah, we'll let you learn more about this. And this wasn't easy to find. I like scoured the internet. I Googled, I Reddited, I Instagrammed, I just looked. And eventually I happened across Lab Society. These are some guys down in Colorado, maybe obviously. And they were all about, they do a lot of stuff now, but they were putting on courses on fractional distillation and isolation of CBD from CBD distillate.
Okay.
Which I took that course, leveled up in a huge way, started to make some connections to people, which was really big. And more than just that, like just kind of got more inspired. Like it became like a snowball effect where I was like, wow, like that was really something, you know, like, and plus that was my second visit to Colorado, but first visit first visit with like weed as a focus. And when you go somewhere with a focus, you suddenly see it everywhere, you know, dispensaries, and you're like, wow, like there's a whole industry building around
eyes
this.
Eyes are open to it and whatnot.
Yeah. And then I found another course in Las Vegas with Extracts Academy, which kind of went more into like post-production formulation of the different types of hydrocarbon extracts. So think like shatter, obviously, but then like butter, batter, you know, honeycomb, like, you know, all of these crazy terms that we have for different textures. I was just trying to level up as fast as possible, like get as much information into my head as I could. You know, I've done a lot of Zoom courses were really helpful, a lot of online stuff. I joined the Good Life Gang. I'm not sure if you're familiar with them, but there's an extraction focused forums called Future 4200. And that's kind of like, you know, it's the real deep. You'll meet a lot of people there that have been in the game for a long time. There's a lot of crowdsourced knowledge there. And that's where a lot of like the current like leaders of the industry like communicated with each other and still do to this day. So it's a great spot to be. The Good Life Gang is like this membership that you can be a part of, which gives you kind of a deeper, you know, it provides you access to like, some proprietary information, gives you access to events that they put on. It's just like if you want to like get more connected, it's something that's helped me out immensely in that regard. And so, and to sort of sum this up, now I was really starting to like be something. I was getting like, you know, I had this background, but now I was getting like kind of, I could make the claim that I was becoming formally educated. Because this is the thing, my degree was not in anything related to this. I don't have a science degree. I don't have an engineering degree. But what I had was an intense driving passion to like just learn the very specific things that I need to know to be able to say, yeah, I can do this stuff. And then I had an opportunity to work in an ACMPR grower, kind of like sort of practicing what I had gained. And then I started looking for legal jobs in the industry, because I was like, I need to move into something more secure, more
Of
stable.
course, yeah.
And that's when I found the job out here as a processing technician. So I applied. They said, we'd love to have you. And then I made the big move out to BC, and that's where I'm at today.
That's a fantastic journey. I love how you made your own education essentially by finding the right people to work with and whatnot. Because there's no, well, maybe there is, maybe there's now, but there was no college course that you could just sign up and go do your 8 hours a day and get your degree, and here you go, professional extractionist.
Mhm.
Uh, that's so cool. I really want to talk now about the sciencey kind of thing. I mean, you touched on it very slightly there. You said the word hydrocarbon, and I know that's a big part of understanding what's going on here. I'm not that versed in it, and some of my viewers probably aren't either. So, could you tell us about hydrocarbons, why they're important, and how this all fits together?
Yeah. So hydrocarbons is actually like a very large class of organic compounds. It's a lot of different chemicals that we call hydrocarbons. But when I'm talking extraction and I say hydrocarbons, I'm usually referring to things like butane, propane, isobutane, heptane, pentane. To some degree, it's a subclass of hydrocarbons known as the alkanes class,
Okay.
and we're familiar with these, right? We use propane in barbecues. We have butane in our lighters. These are things that we use, and they are also used quite a lot as solvents in other industries. Like hexane is used, I believe, in oil seed extraction,
Mm-hmm.
if I'm not mistaken. And the reason that these are um, great to work with is because you have to think of a little bit what it is that you're trying to get out of cannabis when you're extracting it. Well, we're going for the cannabinoids, and we're likely going for the flavor compounds, the terpenes. And so these are, generally speaking, non-polar molecules. And so there's polar and non-polar. Polar would be something like water. Non-polar tends to be fatty molecules.
Okay.
Um, and there's a principle in science or chemistry, which is like dissolves like. So just like how, if you've ever had like a motor oil stain on you or something like that, and you know that washing it with water, it's not going to do anything. So you might get
Right.
some olive oil and like rub it in there because it kind of helps pull it out a little bit. That's the idea, is the oil and the oil will help, like
They
they'll
bond
help.
together easier, I guess, on
Yeah,
a
and
chemical
water
level.
just won't. They're like anti each other.
Right. Right.
So in this way, hydrocarbons are great at dissolving cannabinoids and terpenes. But there's another point to it as well,
Okay.
is the cannabinoids and especially terpenes are very delicate compounds. And when I say delicate, I mean they're volatile. They're apt to leave under not too stressful conditions. So think about this: when you're curing, you try and create like a very stable and relatively low temperature cure room, because if you go too hot, you're going to cook all your terps off, right?
Yeah,
And you're
and
going to be
stinks like
left with,
hay, and it's just, yeah.
yeah. So extracts are the same way. If you're playing too much with heat, then you can say pretty much goodbye to your, the flavor molecules that you would ideally like to stick around. And so what's nice about things like propane and butane is they have very low boiling points.
Okay, okay.
Propane is like minus 44 or minus 40, and then butane is like half a degree below zero. So it's very cold. And it doesn't take, like, you can basically evaporate them at room temperature
Hmm.
if you want to. And so that's great for two reasons. One, for terpene preservation, and two, uh, you also want to avoid degradation of the cannabinoids. So high temperatures or temperatures for a long period of time will also cause like conversions in your cannabinoids. And it does have a lot to do with what your end goal is. But if your end goal is to preserve certain compounds, then hydrocarbons are a good class of solvents to use for that purpose. Does that
Very,
make sense?
very
I
cool.
hope. I
Yeah,
hope.
absolutely. Yeah, yeah, no, definitely. And, I'm sure there's more research people can do out there. If they want to look into the specifics behind the chemistry. Bringing this now then into specifically talking about cannabis, I mean, you take and you process raw flower into distillate, from what I understand, but there's a whole bunch of ways to do it. I mean, you touched on shatter and butter and whatnot. Can you break down the different processes and sort of how we get to the different types of extractions?
Yes. Different extractions or different extracts?
Oh, yes. I guess I
Okay.
asked
Okay.
a bit of an interesting question there that I didn't even
Uh,
understand. So,
well. So because there's the way I like to say this is there's many ways to skin a cat.
yeah.
It really comes down to what your end goal is, because in some cases you can use several different extraction processes to arrive at the same endpoint, but some of those don't make sense because they're extra steps or they're more energy intensive or they're more expensive to set up. You kind of want to go with the easiest and cheap, the solution that makes the most sense for what you're trying to end up with. So um, hydrocarbons and to some degree solventless will give you the greatest range of final product outputs, because they're really good at preserving compounds like terpenes and cannabinoids, like I said,
Mm-hmm.
in their original form. So now I'm just going to quickly mention something that can be a little bit confusing. There is a compound called THCA, and there's a compound called THC. And for many people, they only know THC,
Yep.
and the idea of THCA is very confusing. So THCA stands for tetrahydrocannabinolic acid, and then THC stands for tetrahydrocannabinol. And the plant is producing THCA, it's synthesizing it from CBG. And but when we are consuming cannabis in a traditional, say I'm smoking a joint, I'm inhaling THC because that THCA is getting decarboxylated with the heat, as the flame basically goes
It's
along
your
the line.
catalyst in it, essentially.
Yeah, yeah. So I think the range of extracts that most people think of are things like shatter and butter and live resin. There's many of them, and those, typically speaking, are interesting crystallizations of THCA, not THC.
Okay. Okay.
Yeah, and distillate, however, is THC. So that's why it's sort of a basically a runny or a thick runny liquid, as
All right.
opposed
All
to
right.
any kind. It will almost never have like a physical structure in the way that like shatter has a physical form,
Yep.
or diamonds is like literally like little rocks or whatever. So the process that I work with doesn't use hydrocarbons; it uses alcohol, and that's similar but slightly different. And it's done with alcohol because we kind of have one end product in mind. So you could make distillate via hydrocarbons, but we've opted to use alcohol for reasons.
That's yeah. Click, click, click. Oh, just yeah. You really brought it together well, and I didn't understand that's how it was before. Let's talk gear though. What's involved in the design and maintenance of the system here, specifically for alcohol based, or is it a lot different? Tell me more about these machines.
Well, so the first thing to know about the difference, like when you're setting up alcohol systems versus hydrocarbon systems, is hydrocarbon systems really rely on phase changes. And what I mean is, like, we have phases like gas and liquid and solids, right? Um, these hydrocarbons, they easily can transition between gas and liquid state. So versus alcohol, we'll mostly be working with it in its liquid state. Um, and also the hydrocarbons tend to use systems under much higher pressure. So the design of these systems, at least with respect to safety, such as like fittings to handle like higher pressures, you know, just pressure vessels, the kind of ratings that you're going to be working with, they differ considerably when you're picking between those two methods.
Okay. Okay.
And also it's easier to kind of, either extraction process basically requires a step in which you need to marry or soak your solvent with your cannabis. However you want to do it, that needs to happen. And the length of time, which is sometimes called residence time or dwell time, that you let your solvent stay in contact with your cannabis, is something that's different for different people. It's kind of like thinking about like my specific recipe for making cake.
Okay.
If you understand, like, let's step away from cannabis for a second and think about like just a simple thing in which you want to dissolve some salt in water. Okay, you have a glass of water or a pan of water. You know that heating up that water will allow you to dissolve more salt, and that's because it speeds up the molecules and allows for more interactions. So similarly, you can influence the amount of solubility with certain things, like the amount of time that the solvent spends in contact with the solvent, the temperature of that interaction. But
A lot of variables to work out and get that specific recipe and whatnot. Gotcha.
Exactly. And I should also mention that there are things at which you end up wanting to avoid extracting that are also present in the cannabis plant.
Right.
So we're really not looking to pick up color compounds like the chlorophyll, if possible. We're really not looking to pick up plant fats and waxes, if possible. And so that's why a lot of these extractions are done at very cold temperatures, say like -30 or -40 degrees Celsius.
Right. Maintain the structure of the leaf and the plant matter, but because the trichome itself is fragile at the cold temperature, it's easier to come off. And before we got the recording here, you were talking a bit about something like that?
Yeah, I just want to clarify something. Okay. So in the case of using solvent extraction, you're not worried about the integrity of the trichome because you're literally dissolving it, if you know what I mean.
All right.
It's literally like dissolving salt into water. What we were talking about before was the ice water extraction, or the ice water separation.
Right. Okay. Separation versus extraction then. Okay.
Yeah.
So continue.
Yeah, so that method is more of a mechanical separation, and that's when you are concerned about the trichomes physically breaking off versus, so it's a bit like shaking an orange tree and collecting the oranges in the terms of ice hash versus, I don't know, dipping the whole orange tree in something that like dissolves the oranges away, if that makes sense.
Interesting. But then is the cold then to help maintain that plant matter and just only pull off that, or like what's the reason for the cold, I guess?
Yes, because you're basically influencing the ability for that solvent to dissolve things. The colder you make it, the less soluble it becomes. So it kind of has, like, you're kind of doing this delicate balancing act because you do want to dissolve some things and you don't want to dissolve other things. So you have to kind of, this is where dialing your system and getting your parameters right, where you try and get like, okay, my temperature is set, but then how long do I, how long is my dwelling or residence time? How long am I agitating these things? It's a bit, this is where it gets a little bit more complicated. I hope that you get the general idea of what I'm trying to say.
Absolutely. So then is there math that you can take and apply to this? Is it inherently chemistry, or it's just experience working with the different products?
I would say it's like a trial and error process. There is some, there's an area of things that if I'm familiar, I think it's about -30 and you won't really be dissolving plant fats and lipids. But yeah, there's definitely like a trial and error process because especially with the amount of time that the solvent spends in contact, you can do post-extraction testing of your plant matter to see, okay, how efficient was my extraction, and then repeat the test with different parameters to find out, did I do a better job when we set it with this amount of time and whatnot.
Yeah. So a little bit of chef in the kitchen experimenting, and then you take and test it scientifically, rinse and repeat until you dial
Mhm.
in. Okay, okay, yeah, that's very, very cool, man. And the process itself is terribly interesting. So then, I guess what are you looking at as being the key factors that you have to consider when doing this type of extraction, or I guess distillation?
Hmm. Um, there is a lot of factors.
I bet.
The first factor I think is always, what is your end goal? Like, what are you trying to make? Um, if we say distillate, okay, we can go with that. Then you have to work out, um, you know, what's the safest way to do it? What's the permitted way to do it? Because we're not operating in a vacuum. We work in like jurisdictions which have rules for handling uh, volatile compounds.
Yeah.
You know, how much solvent can you safely store according to the rules and regulations. You have to generally build like extraction rooms that are built to specific codes, fire codes, safety codes. Um, so even before you get into like the real fine points of like, oh, how long is my extraction going to be? You have to decide, hey, how fast can I evacuate air out of this place? How much water can my sprinklers rain down if there's a danger? Do I have like inert gas like nitrogen to help, you know, flood my systems with and remove oxygen, or push out the oxygen to make sure that there's not a combustible concentration of materials in it.
Yeah.
These kind of things are probably the factors that come to mind first when you're
Safety.
talking. Yeah, it's
Yeah.
got to be safety. Um, too many examples of black market situations where
Yeah.
things went wrong.
Well, we touched on that off the start too. Just the way of doing that at home. Well, not so much distillation, but like speak hydrocarbon extraction. Look at me learning. And this is not, or I should say, this is exactly why you don't want to be trying this stuff at home, guys, because it's dangerous. If you want to get into at home extraction, there we go, that shoulder, the solventless way, the rosin pressing and whatnot. And you had explained to me at the beginning there before we started that this was something that you needed to quickly get up to speed on. Talk about that a bit.
So, and you've probably seen this in like the growing side, that there can be like rivalries between people and their preferred way of doing something,
Oh yeah,
whether it's right,
yeah,
whether
for
it's
sure.
like their, you
Synthetic,
know,
organic, synthetic, organic. No, it's
that
all good.
that
Just grow weed. But
yeah, that's the big one. It can be
yeah,
something, yeah. So there's kind of this, also this like rivalry between, you know, solvent based extraction and solventless extraction, and some people get pretty worked up about it. I'm not one of those people. I respect the craft.
yeah.
You know, if you can show me good product from your method, and it's done safely, then I'm happy to acknowledge that, you know, what you're doing is awesome. Um, but I would say that rosin was not the area of my. I didn't know much about rosin really
Hmm.
at all. You know, aside from someone being like, yeah, you make it with a hair press or hair straightener, and we squish our buds in there, and
I
I'm like,
love those videos. Yeah, maybe we should just explain real quick if you're not familiar. So, of course, we've been talking hydrocarbon and alcohol extraction using some sort of chemical process to dissolve and strip things away. The rosin press behind me uses heat and pressure to basically squish out and separate the THC from the bud, giving a very, very nice end product most of the time. So,
yeah,
I've had some
yeah,
weird ones, man, but
yeah. It's I like when I'm explaining to people, because most people are a little bit familiar with like olive oil or wine like grape squishing.
yeah, 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 yeah.
You know what I mean? So that's something that I use to kind of make it relatable to people that have no idea what's going on. Um, but then the emergence, you can squish buds, but then the emergence of doing a first step of separation where you're separating the trike heads from the plant matter and then just pressing that, you know, the stuff that those guys can, like
Oh,
the quality of product that those guys can produce, I would be, if I'm being honest, like it would rival some of the nicest hydrocarbon extracts that I've seen. Like just to be completely real with you, I can't, even as a person that like is more on the hydrocarbon preference, I have to give like respect, credit where credit is due, and say like these guys, and more than just quality, like the range of different textures that they're able to produce.
yeah.
You know,
It's just it's yeah, the different products just from the different types of bud and whatnot. I experienced that myself. Some's syrupy, some stuff is sugary, some stuff is, well, dry and powdery even, and it's all pressed at like the same relative humidity and stuff. But ultimately, I don't think it's the product. I mean, to a point, quality and quality out, but a lot of it's going to be, I think, the chef, the person doing the work. So if you've got somebody who's an expert at hydrocarbon extraction or distillation or solventless, you're going to end up with a really nice end product regardless.
yeah.
So that's the thing. Now, I guess talking about the different methods, how is somebody getting into this industry doing what you're doing? If somebody said, Bon Cloud, how can I be you, man? How can I do what you do? What advice would you give them?
So it's a great question because, at the start of this discussion, we kind of went over what my path
Yeah.
was. And that's like, I'm not necessarily, I don't think I could confidently say that someone can go out there and repeat it exactly as I did it. But I can offer some things that, like, sometimes I think, oh, I got lucky, right? Like I was lucky. But it's also fair to say that I did a number of things that sort of like they enhanced my luck, like I made my own luck in a way. I did things that made opportunities more viable for myself. It wasn't just like someone said, hey, here's a job. It wasn't that lucky. I did actually do things. So what takeaways generally could I give someone? um, I I st- I still think that there's a lot to be said for self-directed learning, like
Hmm.
just going and trying to teach yourself however you can, even if that means going to someone, but like finding someone that's willing to teach you, whether that be, cannabis specific courses, which are probably more prevalent now than they were before, or, you know, digesting like a section of a chemistry textbook to like, yeah, I mentioned the word hydrocarbons. What if you go and just spend some time on Wikipedia and just literally like learn a lot more about hydrocarbons,
Yeah.
these kinds of things, and then building up a base of knowledge, and then going into some deeper areas, maybe taking a look at Future 4200 and seeing what people are talking about there, or maybe the step before going to like the cannabis extracts subreddit and seeing what people are talking about there. There is like the the con, or the like the negative side of this self-directed education is there's often a lot of garbage out there. There's a lot of like just,
Yeah.
you know so that there is that side to it too. You can come across stuff because it costs, anyone can go and just write something on the internet, right? If you don't know better, then you might take that as gospel truth. So that's maybe the dark side of it. But yeah, self-directed education, then networking as much as possible. So when I was kind of floating and not really, like, I didn't have a specific thing that I was doing, I just wanted to, like, I knew I wanted to get into the industry. I was going to these like conferences, as like Lyft, for example, Cannabis, and I didn't always have like a ton of money, so I was figuring out ways like, oh, could I like, use a connection, find someone that like had a spare ticket or was just leaving and was happy to give me the thing, or could I volunteer at them, spend a day packing gift bags for attendees, and then the
Yeah.
next day I get like a free pass to go. Just kind of hustling like as much as I could to kind of just rub shoulders with, introduce myself, try and put yourself in a position where you are being in contact with people in that place that you want to be in.
Yeah.
Because,
Yeah. Well, opportunity happens, and you never know where it's going to come from. Because if you can at least get your foot in the door at a facility like perhaps where you work, it's maybe you're cleaning tables, but at least you're going to be in there, start learning something, right? Getting exposure, getting your face seen, whatnot. And now that we're getting around all this stuff that's been happening the last year and a half, definitely more opportunities out there to get out and network with people.
Yeah. Um, yeah, because honestly, like, so, oh, and another good one. This is one that I had up. Like, I had an open Google job search for so whatever it is you want to do, put that into Google. It'll come up with a list of jobs, and it also has an option to be like, would you like to receive updates about this, like as we come up with more of them? And I selected yes. So every day I would get like postings coming into my inbox, and I would read them, and then I would look at the requirements and see what they were. And it was funny because for so long, extraction technicians, the requirements was like masters in chemistry or some other field of science, masters, or something like that. And over time, that started to disappear from the description,
Yeah.
because I don't think they were able to find people that were like, what I mean is, a person with a master's in chemistry has spent some time in school. And I don't necessarily know that 6 years ago there was people joining, university degrees with the idea of like, oh, one day I'll work in weed. They just probably weren't doing that.
Yeah,
So
I'm going to say
there's,
that's probably a fair assumption.
yeah. So there's a split between what the companies were asking for and what the available job pool looked like. And like, someone's going to have to budge in that regard. And to some degree, it was the company. They're like, okay, we'll look for people that have like experience or show motivation, or if you can make the case for yourself that, you deserve a chance, and you're not, you don't have a criminal record, and you're just generally a good person, employable in that regard. Like, that's, I think you can do it. I think it can be done.
It's a new industry. People have got to develop their skills from somewhere. And if you're a hard worker who shows dedication, I mean, again, just get your foot in the door. Really good way to do it. So,
Mhm.
Bon Cloud, when I'm looking to get bud, I'm looking for that product. I mean, what are you trying to find for good end results? Is there particular stuff, like I've heard GMO strains, for example, are good for extraction? Is there particular stuff that you like to work with?
So when it comes to alcohol extraction, you don't necessarily need very nice stuff at all,
Yeah, you're just
because
getting that raw THC, well, raw trichome, I
yeah,
should say. Yeah.
no, THC, you're right, because the process of alcohol extraction, the boiling point is around like 80 degrees, somewhere around that range, like 78, 83 degrees Celsius. That's pretty hot, uh, terpene wise.
Yep.
You're gonna boil a lot of terpenes off, but that's okay, because when even when you get to the distillation stage, you're heating even higher, and you're actually fractionating off the terpenes, because you're literally just focused on making um, a high concentration of THC. The reason that it's called distillate is because you're doing distillation. And when I try and help people understand distillation, the main product that people are familiar with that goes through the process of distillation is alcohol, like spirits, right?
Yep.
And we do distillation of spirits because we can't produce high concentrations of alcohol naturally. Like, so, what we start off with is we throw yeast into like an environment where it's got sugar and water and warmth, and then it starts eating that sugar and excretes alcohol as its waste product. But when it reaches a concentration of, I want to say, between 12 and 14%, that environment becomes lethal to yeast. It like essentially kills itself with its waste product. So what would you do? Like, if that's all you could do, then we would never have like vodka, we would never have, whiskey, we would never have that.
Blasphemy.
But right. So people utilize the difference in boiling temperatures between alcohol and water. They heat up that mixture, and because alcohol has a lower boiling point, it evaporates first into like a steam of alcohol, which they can then essentially guide into another area which is kept cold, and the steam recondenses as a now purified and higher like concentration of alcohol than was
Yep.
once in So distillation is essentially the same thing. It's just a little bit more complex. Usually uses vacuum to achieve what the desired results, but you are essentially evaporating the THC cannabinoid out from a mixture and condensing it somewhere else as your high purity distillate. I kind of lost what the question was that you started with.
Just
Oh yeah, you
what
asked
sort of
about
product?
the. Yes, that's right. So 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 really, when it comes to like starting product, THC is THC is THC. This process will get it out of there, regardless of what your flower is like. Now, saying that, you don't want to start with stuff that is contaminated with pesticides, because that can carry through. You don't want to start with there are remediation processes, I should say that. But if you can start with clean material, it just saves you that step in between, and that's just better overall.
Right.
When it comes down to like your hydrocarbon stuff, well, again, hydrocarbons are really good at pulling out everything that you want. I think where hydrocarbon extracts really excel is if you've got material that has a unique flavor profile. If it's really like, if you smell that and you're like, wow, that's like, straight garlic, and that's like a unique thing that you want to showcase in your final product, then, get like a nice garlicky strain. Or if you've got like a really fruity nose or whatever that is, that's where, if I had to pick, I mean, go high percentage, because you get better yields out of it, the better product you use, for sure. And if you're going to spend the time and the money, you might as well get a greater yield for your effort than a lower one.
Quality alcohol, in, quality out. So
yeah, alcohol is kind of the one that gets like a not so great reputation, because it kind of comes in and cleans up the garbage, if you want to say. It's just about pulling out like every last ounce of THC that you can, and it doesn't need to be your top shelf flower to do that.
Right. But I have to assume that if you've got something that's like a 30% THC, you're just going to automatically get more return because of math.
Oh, for sure. Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. Definitely. It's just that, like, this is where it comes down to what your end goal is.
Right.
But a lot of times your 30% THC is also stuff that smells fantastic. And so the person wants to produce an extract, which, because distillate,
change the flavor and that sort of thing. Yeah.
When we think about the cost of these things, like distillate doesn't sell for very much. It's like a bottom, it's a race to the bottom in terms of price, because it's flavorless, and it's, versus like your butters, your waxes, and your live resins, like, those are the ones that really, take the most money in. So,
no, I mean, I think we kind of hit on pretty much all of it here. And Bong Cloud, it's just like, it blew my mind, man. You opened up all sorts of doors and really made me see and understand how these processes are so different. But at the end of the day, it's all about enjoying a product, be it medicinally or recreationally. And that's the wonderful thing about where we are today. What do you think, though, the next big thing in cannabis is going to be?
Oh, that's a good question.
Yeah, one of my favorites.
There's so many things to consider when thinking about that question. I thought that I would try and answer it specific to extracts, since that's kind of my wheelhouse, because
of course,
because a grower would probably say grower related answer, and a smoker might say a smoking related answer. So I was thinking that or what I would like it to be, but what I think it could be is artistic expressions of extracts. Taking what already looks pretty cool and making it look cooler, making it look more aesthetically pleasing. Just kind of fancying it up, like just like how, I could squirt a thing of chocolate in front of you fresh off of the I could give you like a bunch of chunks of chocolate, and it will taste good if it's made the same way. Like if it's made well, like
Yeah,
it should probably taste good. Or, I could pour it in a nice mold. I could put it in some nice packaging. I could maybe like sprinkle a little sea salt on it or something like that. And really, like we consume with our eyes first, right?
totally,
Yeah,
totally. Bag of peels are a very real thing.
yeah. But extracts, like for the most part, the way I've seen them presented, even in the legal market, is just kind of this like mush that is given to you in a jar.
Here's your jar of
You know?
earwax. So
Yeah. So and like, someone might say, well, the texture of it kind of doesn't allow it to be presented in any way. I'm like, I think that people aren't yet thinking enough about how they could change that, and
for sure.
that's where that's one of the next big things
Yeah,
in
for sure.
cannabis.
It makes a lot of sense because it's every day the science is coming in more and people are looking to understand more. And as that happens, you get these new opportunities, and somebody will eventually develop something that's going to take that into account, and we're going to end up with some sort of cool new product. And hey, someone will make a lot of money and we'll get high. So, all right.
I like to think that, like, yeah, there's always money, but uh, you know, driven by passion is probably
Yeah.
the best way to go about it. And everyone needs to eat and live, so there's no doubt that money is a portion of any business. But I'm I love weed from a way that isn't money based, or even like that I like to get stoned that much. It's just that I love like so much about weed.
Oh
It's a
yeah.
world, it's a universe, right?
Preaching to the converted, man. Yeah,
Yeah.
it's a wonderful plant. I mean, whether you're growing it, extracting it, or just consuming it and enjoying it, I hope that everybody gets at least a chance to enjoy the plant in some way. That being said, Bone Cloud, I have chatted your ear off for an hour, man. You have been a fantastic guest. We're gonna have you back, and we're gonna want to recruit you for one of these live panels we do on the Discord. Those are just awesome. Shout out to Riot Powder for leading those every week and whatnot. And again, as I said off the top, if you want to join the Discord, guys, reach out to me, photosyntech1@gmail.com. Otherwise, guys, been a fantastic episode. Chatting with our boy Von Cloud. Sir, thank you so much for stopping by. We appreciate it.
Thanks for having me. It was a blast. I hope that kind of made it a little bit more opened up, like a world that's sometimes a little bit too, it's a little closed off, a little hard for people to really get into. And I like to try and present it in a way, because that was once me, right? Like I empathize with the person that doesn't know, and I try to like pretend that like me 5 years ago is sitting where you are.
Yeah.
How could I get it across to you in a way that, so your eyes aren't glazing over and you're lost in the sauce of, the hydrocarbons.
For sure.
Yeah.
And guys, if you have questions, leave them in the comments and whatnot. I'll make sure that he gets a chance to at least take a look at them. We can give you some feedback. Otherwise, folks, been a great episode. Long Cloud.
Thank you so much.
We out.
Take care. Thanks for having me.